Our guest today is Sunaina Mehta, and she is here to share with us what I'm going to be calling the art of rebuilding. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but if you are in a life transition and you need to have some ideas about how to restart and how to rebuild, you're going to want to hear what she has to say. Let's get into the episode. Hi, I'm Sharlene Lee. Welcome to Your New Chapter, a podcast for women who are starting over and ready to do the work of rebuilding from the inside out, stepping into who they're becoming with clarity and intention. Sunaina, welcome to the show. I am looking forward to what you have to share with us today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so grateful that you're here. I always like to frame the conversations. As you know, we've discussed and we've met, and this show is for women who are navigating transitions, life transitions, or wanting to make a pivot, or maybe they're needing to start over. But the thing that they have in common is that they feel stuck. They know that this change needs to happen, but they're not sure how to move forward. And, there are lots of reasons why someone may need to start over, not necessarily from a negative circumstance, not necessarily from a crisis. But I have you on the show today because from what I've learned about you, I'm going to call you the queen of starting over and the queen of getting unstuck. And so I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the listener.
Isn't it funny that introducing oneself gets harder and harder the more you end up doing in your life? And the more you end up seeing because you just want to share it all. So let me make this as tight as I can. So my name is Sunaina, and I am the founder of Design Your Next, which is a strategic direction practice for enterprising women. My purpose is really to activate creative confidence in as many women as possible so that they not only clarify who they are, but they're able to truly feel the confidence and have the structure to create what comes next for them that feels meaningful and real in their lives, their contribution to the world. My background is in innovation strategy, brand strategy, and design strategy. I began my career as an architect. I worked in advertising and headed strategy departments in branding for many, many years, a few agencies. And most recently in my corporate career, I was the global head of insights at a technology firm, so at HP. But I quit it all and I made myself that queen once again. I crowned myself with another amount of territory. And I'm American, but Indian origin, rather confusing, traversed the globe a couple times. And it's very nice to be here. So, hello.
What a lovely intro, succinctly, yet so much detail. I've called you the queen of starting over. And I love hearing about what you do, and what we do is so aligned. And you said something about helping women to clarify who they are. And this is why I wanted us to have a conversation together, because the coaching work that I do helps women to get clear about their identity so that they can move forward, shedding those old false labels that no longer serve them and helping them to be really clear about who they are. Because when you're clear about who you are, then it is easier to move forward. Not being clear about who you are, if it's the thing that keeps many women stuck, even though they know that they're ready to move forward. Let's start with having you share some of your experience of having to start over multiple times.
I'd like to think of it and starting with just a phrase or the two words starting over. I've started seeing starting over almost as more as an evolution than a reinvention. Yes, every time has been, honestly, in many ways from zero. But each time has been with me building upon my own courage and sense of self belief, knowing that the thing I'm starting with is all of me. And some of those experiences, I guess, it began as early as when I was 12 years old, and I moved from the United States to India with my family and had to adjust to a new culture, a culture where I looked like everyone else, but I certainly was nothing like everyone else. I have also been divorced a couple times in single mom in New Delhi. I have moved to the United States and divorced again, circumstantially needed to do that. And I quit my job 3 years ago at the top of my career and never looked back. So my experiences have been on all sorts of fronts, and I think what really ties them all together is the strengthening self-belief and the willingness, the courage to bet on myself every time. That is not easy. So this point about clarifying who you are, knowing your identity, it is not easy, and it comes over time when you start to test your own boundaries and see where your own lines are, is when you start to understand who you are.
Because, a lot of the work I do is around helping women with identity. Can you tell us a little bit about having to start over when you were 12 years old? Because you had one identity and you said, and you went to somewhere else where it looked like you fit in, but you didn't. I guess that was one
Yeah,
of your formative experiences of having to start over.
absolutely. That was the beginning of the beginnings. Uh, so when I was 12, I was very much growing up in a middle class American, very white community in the 80s. I was the only brown girl in my school, for example, or in the area. But that being said, there were a lot of Indians who looked like me and shared my family's culture and traditions, but they lived in what I call the aptly named Centerville, which is where all the doctors and the people of money lived. And I lived in Moraine, which is, basically the ditch that the glacier carves out, right? Um, so we were, so I was more white, if I must use the color, right? I was more like them than I was like my Indian friends. And I was fishing. They were teaching. I had a Bible because my friends were all Christian. They taught me to bike and skate, and we would have fun. It was wonderful. It was absolutely wonderful. And I never really felt my color. Like, it didn't really, really matter, except maybe when, you get your turn 12 and you start liking boys and you start questioning things. But that was the extent of it, right? I was popular. I was a straight A student. And I was oblivious to my home in terms of, we were 80s kids, run outside, have fun, and then my father, through a series of circumstances, lost his job, and he was at MetLife. Like, unlike everybody else who were doctors, he was a regular Joe in Dayton, Ohio, and he lost his job. And my mother at the time said, we can live. Speaking of queens, we will live like kings if we move back to India. Now, for my family, for my mother and my father, it was back to India. For me, it was to India for the first time, right? In fact, I used to say back a lot. Oh, we moved back to India when I was 12, almost Freudian, because I was so conditioned to believe that I was returning to my home country and that is where I was supposed to belong. So we made the move. I did not speak the language. I could not do Kakaga, which is the ABC, right? I couldn't spell, I couldn't speak it. I opened my mouth and I sounded like a foreigner. This was pre-privatized India, and we didn't have a lot of money. So it was always like we were the poor cousins of the family, educated family, relatively upper middle class, mass affluent. And then there was us. With my father was an alcoholic who turned to drink, and increasingly so, on account of the movie. He was on the spectrum, but in those days we didn't know what that was, right? We couldn't identify that. My brother also was on the spectrum. So my family life was very, very, I would say, it was pretty dysfunctional. And so they were uprooted into this culture where I had no anchors. There was no tethers in anything. And I was told, go to school and figure it out. I couldn't speak the names of the mountain ranges, the emperors, the history, let alone the streets, right? It was very, very hard. The one analogy I always take is like I had a watch. Swatch had come out at the time. You remember Swatch watches, right? And it was white. And I was so proud of it. It was a $30 watch I got as a gift for my birthday before moving to India. It turned brown. It was so funny how my white watch turned brown with the dust and the grime and the going to school and the heat and feeling the heat from the road seep into my feet through my shoes. It was a different life. And my home was not a great home. I mean, we had to cross over an open drain to get to where I lived. Like everything changed. I had French provincial canopy beautiful furniture in my bedroom in my suburban house in Dayton, and then I went to sleeping on a metal folding bed. It was intense. It was a culture shock where I was told sink or swim, and for the most part, this is it. So my mother, I remember I tried to run away from school one day, and my mother, she dragged me back to school and took me into the principal's office and said, "You will go to school." And I looked at her and I remember screaming, I can't do this. I can't do this. I won't be here. She grabbed my arm, pulled my hand off of her wrist, and said, "You don't have a choice." And like that was the beginning of my life of trying to figure out. It was my survival. My family was too caught up in their own issues, which, were quite deep. And I had no option. And I held on to the one thing I had. That was probably the first time I went, okay, I'm smart. They demoted me in school. They pulled me down a grade. And I couldn't handle anything. So they're like, she's not smart. People looked at me like I was stupid. It was hard. And I'm like, nobody tells me I'm not smart. Nobody looks down at me. And that was the beginning of my academic drive. In 1 year, I went from being the joke to being almost to the top of the class and acing exams. And even in Hindi that I could not speak, I committed answers to memory and I would regurgitate stuff onto paper just to get the better grades. I would do it. And then that's when I started getting good, people started to admire me. Oh, she's this foreign thing who can do all of this. Suddenly, the adults were blessing me. The teachers were holding me up as this grand example. They double promoted me. I ended up as like house captain in school and, all these wonderful things. And all of a sudden, I was everybody's favorite person. I was extremely popular. I graduated as like the Miss St. Mary's of the school, like the prom queen kind of thing, you know? And here I am, I'm assimilating and showing everyone that I can't be held back. And that won me a lot. It also defined the way I made choices later in life and actually affected, therefore, the wrong choices even I made, right? Or the not so great choices that I made. I was I was in search of approval because approval brought me success. And that's how I continued.
Hi there, a quick word from today's sponsor, which is me. Sharlene Lee Coaching is designed specifically for women like you, women who are navigating life transitions, feeling stuck in the in-between and ready to uncover who they truly are so they can finally move forward. If that's you, I'd love to connect. Head to my website, charlenelee.com, to book a complimentary discovery call with me. Let's talk about what your next chapter could look like. This is a fascinating story, and I'm thinking about the impact that had on your identity. And it sounds like you formed a new identity, but this one was based on approval. But you said something that made me think back to something I had learned about you. So you said that when your mum took you kind of kicking and screaming into school, She told you that you don't have a choice. And I know something that you say a lot is that choosing yourself is the most graceful act of rebellion. Do you think that was the seed for that?
Yeah, I think so. And in that case, the choice for myself was to win the approval of, and that is what has evolved over time. But absolutely, it's like nobody, I'm second to nobody. And I'm going to make sure that I'm never second to anybody. And it's going to be on my terms. On that time as a child, my terms was to be there. But graceful rebellion is really an essence for me. It's rebellion because I do push against convention. Like if convention dictates that I am X, I will be Y. And I will do that in alignment with my who I am. And that's what's graceful about it, because when it's in alignment with you, it's meaningful and beautiful to you. And therefore you feel motivated to drive it further, right? So that's the grace. Grace is being loving yourself enough to do that work.
I love that you spoke about making decisions that are in alignment with who you are, and it's who you are at your core. That's where the work has to be done in a lot of us, is that we have to understand who we truly are, because situations and circumstances can cause us to cover up and suppress who we truly are. And so we have to do a lot of work around, I wouldn't say necessarily rediscover yourself, but sometimes it's a journey of discovery to discover who you truly are, what your true identity is. You've spoken about what it means to choose yourself. And I want to think more about the listener who may feel stuck in a transition. Why would you say it's important for the listener to work on their identities and their purpose before trying to deal with external things?
Because if you continue to move forward with the way the external environment is asking you to, without knowing yourself, you'll never find the joy that's in the simple, in the everyday, in the present. You'll never feel the excitement that you will feel in your bones when you know who you are. You will go through life seeking external validation. And for some people, maybe that works. But at the heart of it, that's what creates anger. It's what causes toxicity. I mean, I have been a part of toxic environments, and I could see myself even creating them when I was pushing into those environments where I thought, well, this is the way. This is the way I'm supposed to be. It's where the sharp elbows come out. It's where the ruthlessness happens. It's where, I mean, even in a situation like mothers in laws and daughters in law, where there is territory at stake, right? That competitive bitchiness, toxicity is coming from that woman in you who is asking to be her whole person, but she is conforming to an environment where she has to play roles that aren't aligned with who she is as a woman.
And you made me think in your response where if we allow external things to direct us, then we're always going to be bounced from pillar to post because the external is always changing and we don't have control over external things, but we do have control over what's internal.
And we have so much potential. We are creators. I mean, by biology, we are creators. Imagine this world when we're in alignment. What could we do?
And that's why I do this work. This is why I'm so focused on coaching women to be aligned. You said there's so much potential. And I see this in people all the time. And, they can't see in themselves sometimes, which is why they need people like you, people like me to guide them and to help them. How does a woman in a situation where she's needs to start over or pivot or any type of transition, but she feels stuck, how does she know when she's actually ready for the new that is ahead of her?
When she feels restless inside, I say, if you're restless, you're ready. If you've said this sentence, I have so much more inside me, but somehow I keep playing small. How do I stop playing small? If you're asking that question, it's time. Because you may not be able to put your finger on what it is or who you are, but you're ready to find out. And if you're ready to find out, that means you're ready to step into the unknown. And I think you and I were talking about this perhaps on a pre-call, but it's only when you step into that unknown that you actually get to know who you are. Because that's where all bets are off. It's you. What are you going to do? Find yourself in that process. And that's a very scary way of doing it. That's how I do it, which is big giant leaps, but I don't advise that. I've just been leaping for so many years, right? So it's a different but stepping at least a little into the unknown, nudging the boundaries is where you're going to find out and discover who you are.
I have learned, I also have done many transitions, started over many times. The direction only comes when you're moving. I always like to say, God can't direct a parked car, because if you're given directions but you're stationary, you just spin in circles. So you have to take a step in a direction. You said if you're restless, you're ready. And I like that, because really feeling stuck is not a bad thing. It's an indication that you're trying to move forward. You're only stuck if you're trying to move forward, right? And so I like this reframing of this restlessness. Something's just not right. That feeling, it's actually a sign that you're ready for the new that's ahead of you.
Mhm. The other one, to your point of the parked car, I say, and this is clarity without action. Like, you can be clear, you can have a lot of mindset changes, which is important in this kind of work that you do to coach, right? Is you bring clarity, but clarity without action ultimately is theoretical.
What would you say to a woman who feels like everything she's trying, it's not working? Every door, every direction she tries to take, she's trying things, but she still feels stuck.
Hmm. She's trying things and therefore she's learning. Now, if you impose the time boundary on everything, then you're bound to fail, because it all takes time. But it will happen. It will happen. So take the bounce backs as data. Take it as information. Take it as learning. Take it as a way of you becoming more confident, because you're like, oh, well, this doesn't feel right. I think, though, to really, really feel that alignment, going back to your earlier point, you have to say, this is my identity. This is who I am. Because then you know how hard to push or how much to go, and you feel it very, very strongly. Because a lot of people, they'll try lots of little things, will be very proud of being quote unquote multi hyphenates. Oh, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a that, I'm a that. It's great. But at your core, what is the work? Because for me, it's about the work, right? For me, this is not like design your life. It's design your next contribution, your next thing that you're going to put into the world that's going to make a difference. I mean, when you're thinking about that, if you're aligned, you will actually, I have felt this. I've felt this. You will feel it in your bones. Like, design your next for me is in my bones. It's going to work because I know in my bones that it's right.
Because you're operating from the place of your identity, everything is aligned.
Yes.
I would like to talk about this idea of done waiting for permission. What's your experience been of women who perhaps don't take action because they feel like they need permission to do the next thing?
One thing I always say is, you don't need to be empowered by anyone else. You are self-empowered. You are an empowering being. If you connect yourself to your intuition, if you get out of your head and into the pit of your stomach and into your body, you're going to realize that you are a very strong self-generating empowerment engine. It's there. The outside will never give you permission. The outside has structures in place. There are systems that exist. So your choice is, do you choose to work within those systems and ultimately do what others require of you or ask of you, or do you make your own choice? Um, you are not alone when you walk away. You are actually more connected than ever when you do it. And it is true. You're more alone if you stay where you are.
You're not alone when you walk away because it can feel lonely. I know about the work you do with Design Your Next, and you said contribution. What does strategic design have to do with how a woman authors her next chapter?
And the question, first of all, is what the heck is strategic design? What is that? I just did a master's in strategic design for global leadership, which sounds like a lot of big fancy words. So, what is strategic design? So, the purest way of looking at it is, first of all, it's human centered design. And now it is sounds like, obviously, isn't just, I mean, that, duh. Like, shouldn't everything be centered on the human being, right? But it's not. Things are created for a dollar need, for business. People don't design necessarily with the human being's needs in mind, at the center. Sure, we're answering a problem, but we're not designing it with their needs in mind and how they will use it, right? So strategic design is all about the process of understanding a human's need, empathizing with not just what they need, but the reasons, the emotions, everything around that. So the first stage of that is empathy. And then from empathy, you go, well, let me frame the problem they have. So we always look at that as like, what is the problem we're really trying to solve? What's deeper, the root cause? So you put that same process on yourself as a woman. So I'm just quickly going through the processes. It's empathy. You understand the problem. You find the insights that will help unlock that problem as a human being. And then you practice, you iterate, you experiment, you try new things, you develop a prototype in the design sense, right? A concept, and then you execute that and you realize, well, it needs to change, something needs to get better, etc., etc. And it's a cycle. And then you come back, right? Um, Applying that to your life, I applied that to my life over the past couple of years. First of all, I was doing this program, this master's degree, where we were learning how to be human centered designers. I was getting a nice crowning achievement for my tiara or whatever. Uh, Uh, and so what I realized is I actually went through that process as a person. So I empathized with myself in a deep, deep way over the past couple of years that I had never done before. I began to see myself, love myself differently, find that community, and then begin to go, so what if? How might I do X? How might I feel like the problem statement for me was all the success I achieved in my corporate career, why does it feel like losing? Why does it feel like I'm losing myself? That was my problem. And my how might I get back to my authentic self? And so I went and empathized with myself and I said, what if I created this thing, right? What Design Your Next is? What if I created something that activated creative confidence in women? What would that look like? And then I go from there. So strategic design is a process of empathizing with yourself, understanding your own situation and problem, and then solving for it in ways where you see what makes a difference and what motivates you.
It's so interesting as you speak, Sunana, because I used to be an educator. Your process of strategic design sounds very, very similar to the design engineering process that
Hmm.
we use for STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts,
Hmm.
and maths. I've never thought about the design engineering process for human beings.
And it's strategic. So very important to me is this is strategic. I'm not saying do 5 different things. I'm saying know who you are, who your core, solve for that problem, ask how might I and what if, and therefore experiment and practice and play, right? Recognize that the system is not what we're solving for. We tend to solve things for the systems that are in place to suit the convenience of the systems versus to suit us as human beings.
I'm encouraged and inspired by listening to what you're sharing. And I think we're on parallel lines in that what you've created, what I've created has been born out of personal experience. And
Yeah.
it positions you so well then to equip other women and to support other women because you've lived it. Like you said, it's not just a theory. No, it works. I know doing the work on identity works because I've done it. And that's why I'm here doing this right now.
And the other piece of this that we always say you have to trust the process. I remember when I first began my master's and I was talking to my program director going, yeah, I don't know what the heck's going to come out of this. What am I going to do with this degree? I want to do it. I know I want to do it, but I'm not sure who's hiring because I was still in that mode of, oh, shoot, what kind of job am I going to do in my life? Right. It was still there, that little bit of that lingering mindset. You have to trust the process. And that's what she said to me. Just trust it. You say plan and design your next. It does not plan the business plan that's going to get you to that, the Gantt charts, those charts, those waterfalls. No, you have a sense of your vision. You have a sense of it. You know where you are. You know what matters to you. Now unfold it. It is going to unfold. It is not going to go per your dictated plan. It's not.
And we have to let go of those expectations because that's where the disappointment comes. We have to expect resistance.
I didn't do this. How could you? Then you start to self-flagellate, right? Like,
Yeah.
no, trust the process.
For the listener who wants something actionable because they're sensing this restlessness, what would be the first thing that they can practically do to start this process of designing their next?
Mm-hmm. The Everybody goes to the outcomes. I go to the origins. And I don't mean from a trauma, inner child perspective. My biggest tip is start to play. Play. Remember how you played. Sometimes I'll ask people in the program to put down how they played as a child, what brought them energy and joy. What energized you when you played? How did you play as a child? What got you to lose track of time? Because your intuition was at its strongest when you were a child. Even if you lived in very difficult circumstances, you still found ways to find your joy, right? How did you play? Now look for those patterns across your life. How is that play evolved? So I ask people to go back to what play was like. And therefore, I ask them to play again, draw again, color, use your hands, be spontaneous. Do the stuff that takes you back to the things that energized you and have always energized you. You will see there's a pattern. You will find it. So start to play.
I like that. And it's paying attention to yourself for once, because we've often just spent our lives serving everyone else and fitting into the systems and structures that we've been told. I really appreciate that you've shared that. So, Nana, we're wrapping up, but I'd like to ask, is there one final word or piece of advice that you would give to any woman who feels that a pivot is necessary, but she feels stuck?
You are more powerful than even you know. By virtue of the fact that you are a woman and your story is being written, author it. You can author it. You have the power to author that story. It will work out. It will. And it may not work out the way you planned it, but it will. So I would say to be unstuck is to recognize that you are powerful. Don't accept that you're not. Think about that. Reflect on that. What does that mean? Things will show up.
Don't accept that you're not powerful. So, Nana, you've given so many wonderful nuggets, and I know that people are going to want to check out what you are doing. So where would you like people to go if they want to find out about Sunaina?
Go to my website, designyournext.studio. I've put some of my story there and more about me as well as what I'm doing for women. But that's a great place to start. But I would love to hear from anybody. I'm all about activating creative confidence in women so they can leave their own footprints for others to follow.
Wonderful. Sunana, thank you for your time. Thank you for everything you shared on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Likewise, it was great. Thank you so much, and thanks to all your listeners for listening.
What a way to kick off the interviews on this show. I'm so grateful for the things that Sunana shared, her vulnerability, but also the passion that she has behind what she does. There were a few things that stood out to me from the things that she shared. One was about clarifying who you are, and that it's so necessary to clarify who you are in order to be able to design your next chapter or whatever is next for you. And as Sunana put it, to design your next contribution. I also was really encouraged by the way that Sunana reframed a lot of things. When I asked about knowing when you're actually ready for the new that's ahead, she mentioned that feeling of restlessness. Often we would think of that feeling of restlessness as something negative, but I love how she was able to reframe that, and it's even changed the way I think about that feeling of restlessness. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you have taken away a thing or two that can help you on your journey as you rebuild, pivot, or start over. I look forward to continuing this journey with you. See you in the next episode.